Hello. I want you to stop for a second and be honest with yourself. Have you ever felt an overwhelming weight on your chest when faced with a big choice? I'm not talking about choosing your outfit in the morning, but deciding to change careers, end a stagnant relationship, or finally launch that project you've been keeping in a drawer for years. The fear we feel at those times isn't just the fear of failure, it's something much deeper. The truth is that you, like most of us, are living with the handbrake on. We've been taught that freedom is our greatest gift, but existential psychologist Rollo May identified our great secret, the fear of being free. He realized that total freedom, the kind that demands total responsibility, is so terrifying that, unconsciously, we choose the gilded cage of conformity, of putting things off, and of the life others expect of us. This silent fear, this escape from our own autonomy, is what is destroying your potential day after day. You are becoming your limited self instead of the self you were born to be. The pain you feel, that sense of emptiness, of something missing, is grief for the potential you don't allow yourself to live. But the good news, and the central point of our conversation today, is that Rollo May not only diagnosed this fear, but also gave us the map to overcome it. By understanding the depth of this existential anxiety, we gain the key to unlocking the courage to finally be the main agent of our own lives. Being stuck in inertia is not a destiny, it's a choice. Now let's move on to an in-depth analysis of Rollo May. But first, just make sure you're already subscribed to the channel, because the next videos will be a series of content designed to help you achieve unwavering health. For Rollo May, anxiety is not a flaw, but a compass pointing to the unknown territory of our freedom. He saw it as part of an existential triangle, where freedom forces us to choose, fate imposes the limits of reality, and fear arises in the space between our capacity for choice and the barriers we cannot control. It is the dread of total responsibility, the recognition that, within certain rules of the game, victory or defeat is solely ours. When we try to diminish this fear, what we do is, ironically, diminish the scope of our freedom. The dread we feel when glimpsing our full potential is, in fact, the fear of losing control over the predictable world we've become accustomed to living in. Destiny gave us the marble, but freedom demands that we be the sculptor, and fear paralyzes us at the possibility of spoiling the block. The solution, according to May, is not to eliminate fear, which is impossible, but rather to recognize it as existential anxiety, a sign that we are on an important threshold, and to use it as fuel. This connection is vital, as most therapies focus on eliminating anxiety without addressing its root cause. May reverses the script. He says that anxiety is the price we pay for the awareness of our freedom. Potential is destroyed when we deny this anxiety and, instead of acting, we hide behind habits, routines, and justifications that exempt us from taking ownership of our lives. Therefore, potential only flourishes when we accept the triangle. It is necessary to accept destiny, our limitations, face fear, the anxiety of choice, and thus exercise the freedom to shape the life we want. This acceptance is the definition of existential courage. Existential anxiety is the visceral sensation we experience when we perceive the vertigo of freedom, as Kierkegaard would say. It's not a phobia of spiders or heights, but the dread of the vastness of the future and the absence of predetermined structures that tell us what to do. Rollo May argues that this dread is proportional to the risk of being the creator of one's own meaning. If I am free to create meaning, I am free to create a flawed meaning, or to discover that, in the end, meaning is ephemeral. For the individual living in flight, every choice is a micro-terror, because each yes is a definitive no to infinite other possibilities. The risk of choosing lies in loss and uncertainty. Giving up the security of a bad job for an uncertain dream is an act of faith in one's own ability, and the fear of failing in this act paralyzes. The only way to avoid the dread of choice is not to choose, keeping all options open, which, in practice, is the greatest choice of all, the choice of stagnation. Potential is a victim of this fear. How many great talents and projects never saw the light of day because the person preferred the normal neurosis of a mediocre but predictable life? Potential demands that the individual take the plunge, expose themselves, and accept that freedom implies the real possibility of error, loss, and ultimately, isolation. To be unique and free inevitably means being alone in the responsibility for one's own decisions. By understanding that this anxiety is not something to be cured, but rather to be managed, potential is unleashed. May teaches us to embrace not knowing, to use uncertainty as the engine of creation. When we stop fighting the fear of choice and accept it as part of the growth process, the energy that was previously spent on escape is transformed into the courage to be. Rollo May was a fierce critic of the pop psychology of his time, which he saw as a toxic optimism disguised as mandatory happiness. For him, the insistence on always being positive, happy, and successful was just another subtle form of denial of existential reality, pain, death, finitude, and the inevitable tragedy of life. This forced positivity prevents us from feeling the legitimate anxiety that arises from our confrontation with freedom. Potential is stifled when we are forbidden from feeling the dark side. The fear of freedom is real, and trying to cover it up with a smile and empty self-help phrases only pushes it into the unconscious, where it manifests in more destructive forms, such as apathy, cynicism, or passive aggressiveness. May invites us to emotional integrity, the courage to be who we are, which includes accepting our vulnerability and our capacity for destruction. Escaping suffering is escaping depth. Creative potential and true fulfillment, according to May, are born precisely from an honest encounter with pain and life's most difficult issues. It is in recognizing our finitude that time gains value and the urgency to act arises. Superficial optimism keeps us inert, waiting for things to improve on their own, while accepting the grim reality propels us into action. Therefore, for Rollo May, true mental health and unlocking potential don't come from avoiding the dark side, but from integrating it. It takes courage to look inward and acknowledge one's own shadows and fears, because only then can we exercise the freedom to choose who we will be. Potential is the fruit of authenticity, and authenticity demands that we be truthful about what frightens us. The concept of non-being is central to Rollo May's analysis and is the terror behind the fear of being free. Non-being doesn't just refer to physical death, the end of our biological existence. It refers more dangerously to death in life, the possibility that your authentic and unique self will never manifest itself. It's the risk of spending your whole life playing someone else's game, and in the end, looking back and seeing that you were just a pale copy, a life not lived. This threat of non-being haunts us, but our reaction is, paradoxically, to distance ourselves from the choices that could bring it about. For example, the individual who is afraid to express themselves artistically, but opts for a safe job, is choosing the non-being of their inner artist. They prefer the security of a standardized life to the threat that, by expressing themselves freely, they might be rejected or considered a failure. Potential is literally destroyed by the choice of not being. Apathy, indifference, chronic boredom, and cynicism are manifestations of murdered potential. They are states of being that scream, "It's safer not to feel, not to choose, not to get involved, so that I don't have to face the threat of being." Stagnation becomes the negation of movement, the negation of life. May tells us that potential is only saved when we confront non-being head-on. Freedom is the ability to choose being. Every day we are invited to choose between cowardly denial and courageous affirmation of our existence. Potential demands that we accept the mortality of the body and the finiteness of time so that, urgently, we may live the fullness of the soul. The myth of the innocent is Rollo May's critique of our society, which attempts to promote an image of human beings free from guilt, malice, and above all, destructive power. We strive to be harmless and good at all costs, trying to fit into a moral ideal that, in reality, is a denial of our complete humanity. The person who hides behind this myth is, in fact, fleeing from their capacity for choice and their willpower. For May, being an authentic individual requires recognizing both our potential for good and our potential for evil, the capacity to be destructive, to be selfish, or to cause pain. The fear of being free makes us repress this vital force, this will to power, because we fear that by being powerful, we will become bad people. Thus, we choose weakness, passivity, and eternal innocence. Potential is stifled by this pursuit of harmlessness. Creative potential and leadership demand assertiveness, the ability to say no, to break patterns, and to impose one's own vision. All of this is seen as offensive or not innocent. By limiting ourselves to being merely harmless, we lose the drive, the passion, and the capacity to accomplish great things. We become hostages to the approval of others. Genuine freedom requires us to embrace our strength. May argues that repressed aggression and destructiveness do not disappear. They turn against the individual, causing neuroses and the self-destruction of potential. The solution is the integration of power. It is the courage to recognize one's own strength and channel it toward creation, love, and fulfillment, instead of fearing and suppressing it. So, were you already familiar with these concepts of the fear of being free? Did you already know any of this information about existential anxiety? Let us know in the comments, as we continue our journey through the mind of Rollo May with 10 more essential topics. The comfort zone is the temple of the fear of being free. It's the space where predictability is God and routine is the mantra. It's a self-imposed prison sold as a sanctuary. Rollo May would say that the security we seek in inertia is profoundly deceptive because it protects us from external risks, failure, rejection, but exposes us to the most fatal internal risk, that of a life not lived. Personal fulfillment, by its very nature, demands expansion, and expansion demands that we cross the border of the known. The side effect of remaining in this zone is the slow death of potential. Our abilities, whether intellectual, artistic, or emotional, are like muscles that atrophy with disuse. By rejecting the challenge inherent in freedom, we become trapped in the same cycle, repeating the same patterns and consequently reaping the same results. Potential is not something that is maintained. It is something that needs to be exercised and constantly renewed through risk. Deceptive security breeds existential boredom, a void that we often try to fill with addictions, excessive consumerism, or superficial relationships. This void is the echo of potential begging to be released. The fear of freedom is so great that we prefer the subtle pain of mediocrity to the risk of glory. To escape this trap, it's necessary to redefine security. True security, according to May, lies in trusting one's own ability to deal with the unknown and reinvent oneself. It's accepting that discomfort is the price of authenticity and fulfillment. Your potential expects you to value courage more than comfort. The fear of choice is the clearest symptom of the fear of being free. Rollo May saw that the inability to make meaningful decisions is a way of exempting ourselves from responsibility for the results. But how do we identify this self-sabotage? May points out 5 clear signs. The first is chronic procrastination, the constant postponement of important decisions to avoid the anxiety of the now. The second sign is paralyzing perfectionism, the obsessive need to ensure that the choice is 100% correct, which prevents action, since total certainty does not exist in the realm of freedom. The third is the perpetual search for advice, the need to delegate the authorship of the decision to others, friends, mentors, gurus, so that, if something goes wrong, the blame will not fall on you. The fourth sign is mutual dependency, the tendency to merge with the partner or group, losing individuality so that life and choices are made together, diluting the weight of personal responsibility. And the fifth, and perhaps the most insidious, is apathy, the state of simulated indifference, where the person claims it doesn't matter to mask the real fear of having to commit to a direction. Each of these signs is an act of sabotaging your potential, because potential requires commitment and decisive action. May reminds us that freedom lies not in having infinite options, but in embracing the power to choose one and accept the consequences. Recognizing these signs is the first step in reclaiming your ability to decide and, consequently, to realize your potential. If anxiety is inevitable when facing freedom, Rollo May's genius lies in teaching us how to transform it from an enemy into an ally. He distinguished between neurotic anxiety, irrational and paralyzing, and existential anxiety, rational and motivating. The key is to use the energy of the latter as a catalyst for creation and action. The fear of uncertainty, when properly channeled, becomes the urgency to act. To transform fear into strength, you must first name and accept it. May argues that anxiety only becomes destructive when it is denied or repressed. When you say, "Yes, I'm afraid of failing at this project," and that's a sign that it's important, you take away the paralyzing power of the feeling and transform it into an incentive for preparation and focus. It is the acceptance of your vulnerability that paradoxically generates your greatest strength. Potential is unleashed when anxiety becomes the source of creativity. The uncertainty of freedom forces us to innovate, to think outside the box, and to create original solutions. Art, science, and great endeavors are born from the tension between the fear of the unknown and the courage to move forward. Anxiety is proof that you are on the threshold of your growth. Therefore, May's approach is an invitation to courage, the power to move forward despite fear. Don't wait for anxiety to go away before acting. Use it as a beacon pointing the way to where your soul wants to go. Creative strength lies within your ability to tolerate the discomfort of freedom. Conformity is the social escape from the fear of being free. It's the choice to blend into the masses, to live the life that family, social groups, or the market expect of you. Rollo May describes conformity as the renunciation of uniqueness in exchange for the security of belonging. And this security comes at a very high price: the destruction of authentic potential. In the realm of relationships, conformity manifests as an inability to be honest, to establish healthy boundaries, and to allow oneself to be vulnerable. You become a chronic pleaser, shaping your personality and needs to avoid conflict, or worse, rejection. You live a life of performance where your energy is spent maintaining a mask instead of being invested in your fulfillment. In your career, the trap is even clearer: following the path that makes money or gives status, even if it kills your passion and purpose. Potential is purpose. When a career is guided by the fear of being judged, of being poor, or of disappointing others, potential is diverted to satisfy external expectations, leading to a success that is, internally, empty. Freedom demands that you be an individual, which implies the risk of being different and, consequently, the risk of being rejected. Potential only manifests itself when you have the courage to be the author of your own life, even if it means displeasing others, going against the grain, or being misunderstood. Conformity is the death sentence for the creative soul. Rollo May's theory is only valuable if it leads us to action. If the fear of being free is inertia, the antidote is the exercise of freedom, the intentional practice of making decisions, even small ones, that assert one's authorship. The goal is not to make radical changes immediately, but rather to rebuild the muscle of will. The first practical step is choice recognition. Stop saying "I have to" and start saying "I choose." For example, instead of "I have to go to work," say "I choose to go to work to support my family." This small adjustment in language gives you back the power of agency. The second step is intentional daily decision-making. Choose an area of your routine: what to eat, the route to work, what to read, and make a conscious and different decision to break the autopilot. The third step is dialogue with destiny. List your limitations, your fatum, and next to each one, list an action you can take despite it. If your fatum is a lack of money, the action could be learning a new skill online. Potential is released in the creative tension between limitation and response. Finally, practice anxiety tolerance. When making a difficult choice, instead of getting distracted, stop and feel the anxiety. Accept it as proof that you are acting freely. Rollo May teaches us that freedom is an active process, a continuous struggle that begins with small acts of courage. Your potential doesn't need a giant leap, but a determined first step. Okay, let's move on to the rest of the Rollo May analysis, but first I noticed you haven't liked this video yet. That's really important for YouTube to continue showing you our content, and that way we can keep helping you. So please like this video, it's free. Rollo May's analysis, though predating the internet, is frighteningly relevant in the digital age. Social media has become the new refuge for the fear of being free. It creates a vicious cycle where the fear of individuality is reinforced by the relentless pursuit of external validation. Potential is destroyed when creation is replaced by copying, where the only metric of value is the number of likes or followers. The digital age bombards us with the standard, the ideal body, the ideal trip, the ideal success. This creates overwhelming pressure for us to conform, as individuality is instantly punished with digital ostracism. The fear of freedom manifests as the fear of being canceled, of expressing an unpopular opinion, or of showing a side of life that isn't perfectly edited. Creative potential, which should be unique, is wasted on replicating trends. May would warn that the pursuit of a perfect online identity is the denial of real identity. The individual becomes an avatar, a shallow projection, and inner emptiness grows as authentic life is neglected in favor of performative life. To unlock potential, a detox from validation is necessary. It's about having the courage to use digital tools to express your true self, instead of using them to discover what others want you to be. Freedom in the digital age is the choice to create your own content, instead of just consuming someone else's. The pursuit of financial freedom is the great modern goal, but Rollo May's analysis would make us question whether it is not, often, just another escape. Money is power, and power is freedom of choice. However, many seek financial accumulation to eliminate the anxiety of choice, and not to exercise their own freedom. Money becomes a shield against responsibility, and not a tool for potential. The illusion lies in the belief that, by having X million, the individual will finally be free from existential anxiety. But, as May shows us, the anxiety of being the creator of one's own meaning does not disappear with a large bank balance. On the contrary, the weight of choice becomes even greater, because the person no longer has the excuse of scarcity. Potential is destroyed when the ultimate goal is merely security, and not the creative use of resources. The link between money and choice is real. Money buys time and options, but it doesn't buy the courage to be. How many wealthy people remain in toxic relationships or empty careers for fear of losing comfort, exercising the fear of being free by maintaining the financial status quo? Financial freedom is only real when combined with existential freedom. Money, in this context, is merely a means for you to dedicate your time and energy to manifesting your deepest potential. The question isn't, how much do I need? But rather, what will I create when I have the resources? The answer to this question is what truly sets you free. Although Rollo May was a psychologist, his analysis has profound political implications. The fear of being free can manifest itself collectively in a preference for authoritarian leaders or regimes that promise order and simplicity. The paradox is that society, having gained political freedom, often surrenders it in exchange for the removal of the burden of individual responsibility. Tyranny offers an illusion of security. It dictates the rules, defines the enemy, and provides a ready-made sense of purpose, relieving the individual of the anxiety of having to make complex moral decisions. Creative potential and individuality, which are the backbone of a healthy democracy, are destroyed by this preference for political conformity. May teaches us that the health of a society is measured by the courage of its citizens. A nation's potential is suppressed when its members choose passivity, silence, and the denial of their capacity for action. The fear of collective freedom manifests as a fear of chaos and disorder, and the response is to embrace a system that promises to control the uncontrollable. Freedom, both individual and political, is an achievement that demands constant vigilance and courage. The democratic potential of a society depends on the willingness of each individual to assume their responsibility, participate actively, and tolerate the anxiety and conflict that free and pluralistic debate imposes. Returning to the idea of fate, Fatum, this topic delves into the tension that May considered defining of human life. Fate is not the fatality of a horoscope, but the sum of all the realities we do not choose, the body we have, the talents we are born with, the tragedies that have befallen us, and historical conditions. Freedom is our power to respond to this fate. The fear of being free leads us to one of two escapes. Either we deny destiny, I can be anything, nothing limits me, or we deny freedom. Everything is my past's fault, I have no choice. Both escapes destroy potential because it resides precisely in the dance between limitation and response. Potential only manifests when we accept destiny, because only then do we know what our tools are and where our starting point is. The individual who denies fate expends their energy fighting against the uncontrollable, which is a form of denial of reality. The one who denies freedom becomes a victim, succumbing to inertia. Potential flourishes in the middle ground, in the area where will and action meet reality. May's courage lies in accepting finitude, limitation, and suffering as part of fate and, from that honest acceptance, exercising our sovereignty to choose what we will do with it. The tension between what is given to us and what we can create is the source of all art, purpose, and meaning. We conclude with Rollo May's most powerful argument. The destructiveness and emptiness we see in the world and in ourselves, apathy, unfocused anger, aggression, are, in fact, the result of unlived potential. Repressed creative potential does not disappear. It transforms into destructive energy that turns inward, emptiness, depression, or outward, violence, cynicism. The act of creating, whether a work of art, a business, or an authentic life, is the highest manifestation of freedom and the only real cure for the fear of being free. Creation demands courage. The courage to be unique, to expose oneself to judgment, and to venture into the unknown. The courage to create is May's answer to existential despair. She invites us to transform anxiety into driving force. Potential is our call to self-transcendence, the ability to give a unique form to the world and to ourselves. If you are not creating your life, you are inevitably destroying it. Therefore, the ultimate challenge is face your fear, accept your anxiety, and use that strength to create. Your potential is not something to be discovered, but something to be built every day with acts of courage and choice. Unleash the creator within you, and the fear of being free will become merely the shadow of your glory. So, now that you know the story behind Rollo May's fear of being free concept, were you already aware of these events? Let us know in the comments if you knew about them or if you know someone who doesn't, and don't forget to check out the next videos appearing on your screen. Thank you for watching until the end. Remember, the biggest obstacle to your potential isn't out there. It's your reluctance to embrace the anxiety that freedom brings. Choose courage. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue receiving future content. Until the next video.